But the thing that happens so much is people are like, why do you want to talk to me? And honestly, after having you come on now, people are going to say that even more. They're going to be like, you get important people on the show. Why do you want to talk to me? I was like, guys, okay, first of all, the whole concept of the show is that the North is so unique.
Yeah.
And the people that end up here are so interesting and so unique. And anyone's life is interesting if you look close enough. You get such a variety of characters in these places. Like, it's like this interesting sect of, like, not sect, that's not the right word, but like section of human society that ends up north.
Yeah.
And whether or not your family has been here for generations and you know, came from the mountains and things like that, to someone who spends 2 weeks up here and then 2 weeks in Edmonton, you know, taking care of their stepkids, you're all part of the ecosystem in some way. And who are you? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's the idea. And then people are always like, I got nothing to say. I was like, well, could we talk for an hour? And if we could talk for an hour, that's an episode. Like,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So welcome back to the Breaking Ice podcast. My name is Josh Ferguson. And today we have the honor to sit down with Senator Paul Prosper. And thanks so much for coming on. It means a lot.
I'm honored to be here and glad you asked for this interview.
It was funny because I was doing one episode with Danny McNeely, and he was, oh, the senator's coming to town. I was like, would he come on the show? And he's like, let me ask. And he just like rang somebody up. I'm not sure who he rang up. And I was like, that's very cool. So yeah, I'm excited to sit down and talk. And I guess my first question is like, where'd you grow up? Tell me about yourself.
Okay. Well, I grew up in a small Mi'kmaw community called Paqtnkek.
Okay.
And it's in Nova Scotia. It's not much bigger than this Norman Wells itself. We're just about around 600 residents there.
Okay. It's a very familiar size.
Yes, quite familiar. And so, yeah, grew up there most of my life before heading off to university and things like that. So
yeah, and then so you went to school. What'd you study?
Poli-sci?
No.
Well, that was it. I started out in phys ed. I wasn't successful there. I must have been like a Christmas graduate. So I flunked out of my first run at university, went to Boston, did some work in Boston, and then came back and enrolled for a Bachelor of Arts at, then it was called University College of Cape Breton.
Okay.
Now it's called Cape Breton University. So I got a degree for 4 years there, and then enrolled in Dalhousie Law School.
Okay. And then, completed law school. And then when were you like, I don't know when this happens for people, but they go, you know what? Maybe I'm going to run for the Senate.
Wow. It wasn't an active thought in my head because it just seemed so far removed.
Sure.
And, so I worked for Mi'kmaw leadership, Mi'kmaw organizations, predominantly in Nova Scotia, but for a bit there in Prince Edward Island.
Mm-hmm.
So I did advised chiefs and leadership and organizations primarily, and eventually became a chief myself.
Cool.
Back in my community of Paqtnkek. So did that for about 7 years, and then an opportunity arose for me to run for regional chief.
Okay. With
the Assembly of First Nations representing Nova Scotia and Newfoundland, and I was successful in doing that. And it just so happened that a long-term mentor of mine, respected individual, former Senator Danny Christmas, was the first Mi'kmaw senator.
Okay.
And just through my work, I've been before various committees, both within the Senate and House committees, speaking to various issues. But there was an occasion, it was Bill C-92 at the time, dealing with child welfare, where I was part of a team that went before the Senate committee, and so happened it was chaired by then Senator Danny Christmas,
Okay.
and
What a name, eh?
I
Danny
I
Christmas.
I know. Actually, I think he has a relative that her first name is Mary.
Oh,
I know.
that's awesome.
So I don't know. I think something clicked in terms of this whole different area,
Yeah.
something that was just completely off my radar.
Well, you had experience running in the public sector,
Yeah.
right? And then you had experience with leadership. So there is a kind of natural confluence there in terms of ending up in a place like this. How did you? I'm interested in the decision to run for office because I think public, what's it called? A civil responsibility. Like there's that lies in every individual in democracy, right?
Yeah.
And our system relies on people getting involved.
Absolutely.
And how did you enjoy running? Like, was it an enjoyable experience for you? And there's this like difference. Obviously, you're like vying for a public position and it's more competitive, but compared to like, in the private sector, it's very anonymous. So tell me about your experience of running.
Okay.
And it could be your first one. I'd actually prefer that because I think that would be the most impactful one, maybe.
Well, there's a number of thoughts that goes through a person's mind. It never really, although my father was chief,
Mm-hmm.
I had a couple brothers that were chief
Okay.
in my community. And I was just basically content with, providing legal advice and doing that. But it there were two people. Danny, former Senator Christmas, played a role in that, and my sister Darlene
Okay.
Prosper. She actually convinced me on two occasions to run for chief. The first time I ran was when I first just got out of law school.
Okay.
I wasn't successful. I came close, but you don't get anything for being close.
For sure. Is that disappointing?
I guess at the time, I took it seriously. But at the time maybe, but you sort of realize that it was all meant to be. And so the second time she convinced me to run, I thought she was going to run, but by the end of the night and after a couple beers, I guess I was the one that was going to do it. But she had a very effective way of, because I was content with providing advice, and I would write speeches, and finally she just told me, like, instead of being outside of the table, you can be sitting around the table. And in terms of writing speeches, you can write your own speeches,
Yeah.
And so, but I do think leadership, it has a certain way of involving people to step forward. I think leaders, and there are many, not just political leaders.
No, for sure.
But they have that capacity to step forward in times that require leadership.
Yeah, I think a healthy, society and community requires leadership on every level, and whether that be, just, taking care of your nephew and being a mentor for him or her, or some, like those small things go so far in terms of giving people the foundation of confidence that they need to be able to achieve something in their life.
Absolutely, and you just mentioned it. It is an accomplishment, no matter how people perceive it. It's has a way of where you're being of service.
Yeah.
To it could be to a family member, it could be to a friend, it could be to a community, it could be to a nation.
And I think the coolest thing is once you start doing things like that, it gets easier and easier, right? So, and then you can have a bigger and bigger impact on your community. And if more people do that, well, that would be awesome. Right? That's the goal.
Absolutely. And there have been just numerous people that provided that opportunity to me to feel that level of, to just witness leadership,
Yeah.
and to see it operate. And like, yeah, like my mother, she was an incredible leader. She was, a very generous person, not only within family, but within community.
Hmm.
Similarly, my father and siblings, things as well. So, yeah, some people say it's in your blood. I don't know, but maybe it's just a situation of where you witness it more often.
Yeah, I was about to agree that it might seem like it might be in your blood, but it's just about exposure. You know
Yeah,
what I mean? Um, I'm so it sounds like your family is very involved and kind of has been a part of leadership for a long time. How like can you kind of give me a sense of what your childhood was like and how that impacted you and shaped your views till today? That's a
sure.
huge question.
It is. I mean, but it's an interesting question. Well, I grew up in a big family. It was a family of 14. My father died when I was 2, thereabouts. And so they were humble beginnings,
Hmm.
with a single mother, on a reserve. And I got to witness how, this one person was able to raise all my siblings, brothers and sisters. And it takes a lot of coordination. Um, just with older siblings, I was the second youngest. So you have older siblings stepping forward, taking on certain roles and responsibilities. Since it was a fairly small community, we were all quite close within the community and surrounding communities as well. So I certainly wouldn't trade that experience for the world. Those humble beginnings, growing up in a big family, in a
And you said 14, so is that 12 siblings or
14,
okay, so
13 siblings.
yeah, full 14 children.
Yeah,
She
yeah,
sounds like a badass.
yeah. Plus, my mom would, take in other, if there were, families having a hard time, facing certain struggles, she would sort of take in some of those children as well.
So, um, your sister who is encouraging you to run for chief, and where is she in the array of siblings? Was she a mentor to you always, or was she?
Yeah, I'd like to, because she was certainly a leader in her own right,
Uh-huh.
an entrepreneur. She was on council numerous times. She had a lot of integrity. She had an incredible heart. She helped lots of people within the community, and just I would see how she would care and help. It reminded me a lot about my mother as well. So we just shared that relationship, and she was counselor way before I became chief. But when she convinced me to run for chief the second time, when I was successful, she ran for council, and both of us got in at the
Oh,
time,
cool.
which was great. So we had that opportunity where her and I got to work together.
What a special thing.
Oh, so special and so necessary. I don't know how I would have done it without her, because it was a busy time, when you're starting out, and you have ideas, but it takes a lot to put those ideas into
Yeah,
action.
and that like caliber of leadership is difficult because it's like, I don't know how long the term is. What is it?
2
It's
years.
two. Okay, so that's not very long at all. Like, like you
No,
just start wrapping your mind around all the variables, and then it's like, oh, we got to run again.
exactly. It's amazing how quick 2 years goes. I would hear sometimes, community members say like, well, it's an election year. And then I would sort of say in my mind, like, well, don't you know every other year is an election year? I mean, and when you're in a small community, it takes a while for community members maybe to get over the last election result. So,
And then you're in it again.
you're in, yeah, you get a bit of a reprieve, and then you're back into it.
That's so cool. It's really interesting it's interesting to understand your background and hear about your family. I think that's so I don't know. It's just, I think it's illuminating in terms of the work that you're doing now.
Mm.
So when you won the race for Senate, was that like surreal? Like, what was that moment like?
Wow. I always sort of, like I mentioned previously, I never really contemplated becoming a senator or being a senator. It was just beyond the pale of my imagination. But for former Senator Danny Christmas being appointed, it was on my radar. And then when he retired, was contemplating retirement, he was obviously quite concerned about succession.
Mm-hmm.
And he approached a number of people within the Mi'kmaw Nation. And I was one of those persons he approached at the time. I was regional chief with the Assembly of First Nations. And when he approached me, I said, I'll think about it for sure. And I thought about it, and it's sort of like an appointment process.
Okay.
So
I might be completely ignorant until how this works.
Oh no, that's okay. I mean, which is a bit of a godsend because it's not a 2-year term, but so you're appointed by the Governor General with advice from the Prime Minister, and so it's a process that's cloaked with a lot of secrecy, and I guess as it should be. And I put in my application, and it took what I considered to be a fairly long time. I thought it was over because nobody called me, nobody got in touch with me, and I just sort of resolved myself to the fact that, okay, I gave it a go.
Sure.
And then I just got this call. I remember I was in Vancouver speaking at a conference, and it was a follow-up call where they said, "Are you still interested in being a senator?" And I said yes. And then it sort of culminates where you get a call from the Prime Minister.
Mm-hmm.
Almost like, yeah, just that one of those final steps of becoming a senator.
Yeah,
So,
it's like the final, like,
yeah,
it solidifies it.
Yeah, and I guess every senator gets.
How many senators are there?
109.
Okay.
Or 105. Okay.
I'll edit that.
There's 10. The formula is set out in the constitutional, and
What's that?
Sorry, 5-minute warning. We have to check in.
Oh, really?
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Well, shit. Excuse me.
No problem.
I guess we'll just jump into our next section here. But what brings you up here now?
Well, it started with an incredible leader, Senator Anderson, with her region is the Northwest Territories.
Mm-hmm. I've met Senator Anderson.
Yes, incredible leader. Indicated a pressing matter that was going on in our region involving, certainly the community of Norman Wells, but also the community of Toledo as well, with respect to the challenges they are facing with the rising costs of gas slash
It's brutal.
diesel.
It's brutal.
But for certain conditions, climate change, I would imagine, involving, low levels within the Mackenzie River, the depleting timeline or period for the ice roads to be open for heavy traffic.
Yeah, all of the different um, criteria kind of culminating in this situation is
Mhm.
it's hard to specifically point fingers when so many things are coming together like this. Regardless, that we need to find a solution,
Mhm.
and how has been your experience of making the trip and coming up here and having boots on the ground?
Well, it also stemmed from a meeting I had with Danny McNeely, your
Yeah,
local.
that's right, in Ottawa, right, when everyone went down and the
Yes,
mayor.
and Frank and Doug Yali.
Yeah, from Toledo.
Yes, and there was a fairly good contingent there, and it that discussion really resonated with me, where you have some hard realities
Sure.
of what is being experienced here. And one thing that resonated in my mind was that you got to come here to experience it.
It's true. It's true.
And
And I would say you've even showed up at a point when like the reality has kind of set in a little bit. People are hopeful, but
Mhm.
right at the beginning, like the air was thick here, and it was a very scary time, especially with so much uncertainty. And the thing that's well, personally, I feel very fortunate. I heat with wood, so
Mm,
I'm not looking at the heating fuel costs. Obviously, there's a lot of other costs that I'm looking at that are
yeah,
affecting me like everybody else, but. Um, yeah, it's just kind of luck of the draw about in terms of like who needs to fill up when and things like
yeah,
that. And unfortunately, like the families that I feel for the most are the families that maybe didn't have enough money to heat up fill up in the spring, and thought, you know what, we'll just wait till the fall until right before winter, and then
wow,
something like this happens, and
absolutely.
you know,
It's something that I know I can't fully phantom, like
sure,
the implications of that, but what I've heard through certain written oral accounts is quite. It's an item that really motivates a person to try to help in whatever way possible we can, and
and are, is there a mechanism or as a senator, is there a way that you can be helpful other than kind of bringing it, eyes to the situation? And that is also helpful. Like attention is very important,
mm,
right? And but I just don't. Again, I don't know.
well, I mean, there's certainly mechanisms that we're aware of. I mean, but you have some very able leadership here.
I'm very pleased with the amount of effort they're putting into it.
Incredible leadership. They're examining many of the opportunities and options that is available in front of them. There's a lot of strategic thinking and expertise that they have in that regard. So they're ably taking an incredible lead in that regard. I mentioned Senator Anderson as well. So certainly my role is to, support them in whatever efforts possible
Sure.
to use my contacts within Ottawa
Yeah.
to provide a forum or a mechanism for their issues to come forward and to resonate with all parliamentarians, because this is a critical situation, and people have to be quite cognizant of the fact of these realities, because if they were placed in similar circumstances, they would certainly resonate with the dire need for real action to occur now.
Yeah. Yeah. It's certainly, and it's the fact that it's happening to such a small place that's so isolated is
Mm,
like compounds it. You know what I mean? Like so many people already have so many high costs. The cost of just living up here is was already high, but it was
mm,
something that everyone was accepted with the decision to live here. There's so many upsides. You live in a beautiful place. You almost feel like you lived 30 years ago in a lot of ways in terms of the kind of community experience that you have. And so there's so many upsides to it, but then you kind of get these drastic, sobering moments when you're like, we're vulnerable up here.
Absolutely. And there's something special, certainly about my experience being up here. And, it is, something that reminds me, a fair bit of my upbringing.
Mm-hmm.
People, how open they are, how generous they are, how hopeful they are, how resilient they are.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so refreshing to have that experience and to just feel connected and to be of service. That's my job.
Yeah, certainly.
To help those in need and to bring the issues to the forefront.
Well, I don't think I'm not sure how many people know of your visit up here, but for those who do, and even for those who don't, it is an honor to have you here, and it means a lot to have, people who are relevant, who are involved, and who are paying attention to actually come here, because it can so often feel like, yeah, it's only 600 people.
Yeah. And they might say, well, where's Norman Wells?
Anyway? Yeah, exactly.
I mean, absolutely. But I just want to, also recognize your efforts, Josh, yeah, right? Yeah. In terms of bringing these issues forward, talking to the many people that you do, and to just, being part of community and contributing to community, I think is so important. Mm-hmm. To share that notion of spirit, it's truly an incredible thing. And I just want to recognize you for that.
Thank you. Just before we close, I know that we're doing that. Are you optimistic for the future?
Generally, or with respect to this issue?
You could answer both.
I am optimistic because, the situation as it is, something has to happen. Like when you're at a situation where things need to improve, then you're starting at a really critical area, and it does impact people differently. Mm-hmm. For myself, I like to take that on as a challenge. Mm-hmm. And so by nature, I guess I have a fair bit of optimism. I do. But that's something I sense out here as well.
Yeah.
I remember when I became chief within my community of Paqtnkek, the first thing I thought of was, oh my God, all the things that could go wrong in this community. And, I felt like, curling up under the desk in a fetal position. And
yeah.
But you realize that it takes a lot of people to make a community work.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people that have to get up in the morning and make a community work.
Oh, yeah. And on every level, all the people contributing, from fixing the pipes to being leaders, it's almost as important.
Oh, it is. It's of critical importance. Like I used to worry about the things I didn't see.
Sure.
Things that were under the ground.
Yeah.
Many things can happen in a community, like my community of Paqtnkek, but if people don't have water, you hear about it.
Yeah, that's critical. That's absolutely critical.
So I just admire that idea of community spirit and how everyone contributes, and that sense of optimism.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming, and it really means a lot to have a presence and people paying attention to the situation, because it can feel really lonely and abandoned up here. And thanks for coming. I don't know, it means a lot.
Thank you so much. You take care.
You're welcome on anytime. If you're back in Norman Wells, back in the South too, hopefully maybe we can do a full hour and get to know you more.
I certainly would love that, and I certainly would like to be back.
Awesome. Well, thanks you.
Take care, John. Bye now.